Life is good if you know Jesus Christ as your Savior. If you're willing to follow the one who entered Jerusalem on the back of a donkey. If you're willing to put your life into the hands of the one who died on the cross for you. But for millions and millions and millions of people around this world, life is not good because they don't know Jesus Christ like you and I know Jesus Christ. And that's why I'm thankful for the Church of the Nazarene, who has chosen as its mission statement these 7 words: to make Christ-like disciples in the nations. That is our reason for being. That is why we open doors to our church. And if we didn't have that as our purpose, we might as well leave the doors shut and stay home. Back in 1985, the Church of the Nazarene took a giant step forward. They had been planting a church in a new country every 2 or 3 or 4 years. In 1985, they decided to go into 5 new countries all at the same time. One of those countries was the country of Kenya. If you look over here at the flag there, you'll see the continent of Africa, and you'll see 2 countries, one in green, that is Kenya, and the one next to it is Uganda in red. And so Melody and I, being church planters, were asked to go to Kenya to help start the work there. And so we went, and we were sent over to the western part of Kenya, to the shores of the 2nd largest freshwater lake in the world, which is? What's the largest freshwater lake in the world?
Nazarene.
Who said Michigan? There's one a little more superior to that one.
Superior.
Lake Superior is the largest freshwater lake in the world by surface, and Lake Victoria is 2nd largest. And that's where we were put on the port town of Kisumu. And we were said, go over and do the work. And the missionary who was in charge, I said, well, what do you want us to do? He said, just go do the work. He gave me enough rope to hang myself. I was very privileged to be able to work with them and to be able to have the freedom. And so we believe in friendship evangelism. We believe you can learn different ways of telling people about Jesus, but the easiest one for us as humans is just to be a friend. And so we began to make friends, and eventually we started to plant a church, and then second church, and a third church. And in the 10 years that we worked in Kenya, we were able to start 120 churches. That's one church every month for 10 straight years. And that's because God blessed the work, and because the people of Kenya accepted their responsibility to tell their friends, their relatives, the ones they worked with, about Jesus Christ. And soon we had a district superintendent in every one of our districts in Kenya. We had district advisory boards. We had pastors. We had people willing to do the work in order to see the kingdom of God go forward. And so we began to pray 8 years into those 10 years, Lord, where are we to go next? We thought Kenya was the best assignment we could have ever asked for. It was just so easy. And we began to pray, and God said, go west, young man, go west. And so we left Kenya and we went around Lake Victoria into the country of Uganda. The leadership approved us to go and help start the work in Uganda. So we moved over to a little town on the other side of Lake Victoria, another port city called Jinja. Jinja is at the beginning of the longest river in the world, which is the Nile River. The Nile River, kids, is where Moses was placed into a basket and put into the river. I also was put into a basket and put into that same river. My basket was made a little differently. Mine was out of rubber, and I was whitewater rafting the Nile. I had a lot more fun going down the river than Moses did. But there we decided, since God had blessed the work the way we had started it in Kenya, that we would do the same in Uganda. And so we began to make friends. And eventually we started to plant a church or two. And all of a sudden I started hearing something funny in the front of our vehicle. So I went into town. I said, where are the mechanics? Over in East Africa, most of the towns are divided with mechanics here, carpenters here, electricians here. And so I said, where are the mechanics? A guy hopped in the car and says, I'll take you. And so we drove down the road and entered into this big area. Must have been about 20, 22 different mechanics there. He says, I'm going to take you to the best one. I said, thank you, I appreciate that. And so we walked past several until we stood before a man that I can only describe to you as Mr. T. He was big. Big arms, big shoulders, big neck, bald head. I said, hi, my name is Daniel. He said his name was Mohammed. I said, well, Mohammed, I'm hearing some funny things in the front of my vehicle. He says, you have something to do in town? I said, no. He says, go find something to do. And so I went in and started going through the truck shop, trying to see what was there, what the possibilities were in this new town to us. And after an hour and a half, 2 hours, I went back and I said, what'd you find out? He says, well, then you need to know that there's metal parts connected to other metal parts in a vehicle. But those metal parts are not supposed to touch one another. They're supposed to have rubber bushes so you don't hear the bangity bang. And all your rubber bushes were worn out in the front, so I've replaced all your rubber bushes. You're good to go. I said, thank you. I paid him. I got in the vehicle. I drove out into the street. I started driving. All of a sudden, I'm going, wow, this vehicle's not driving like it was before. This is bad. I made a U-turn. I went back into the garage. I said, Mohammed, hop in the car. We need a test drive. So we got in the car. We started driving down the road, and all of a sudden, he said, stop. So I stopped. He rolled his window down, stuck his head out, and said, okay, go ahead. I began to drive. He said, pull over. So I pulled over. He says, where's your tire iron? I said, in the back where you threw it. Didn't even put it away properly. I reached back, got it, gave it to him. He got out, began to tighten the lug nuts on my front two tires. And as I sat there watching him, I wondered, what kind of a mechanic is this? He got in. I said, what's going on? He said, just go back to the garage. So I went back to the garage. He got out. He called about 10, 15-year-old boys to him. And he said, which one of you did I tell to tighten the lug nuts on this Mzungu's car? Mzungu is a Swahili word for white person. One proud boy raised his hand, and Muhammad pointed at him and said, why didn't you do it? I forgot. You forgot. You could have killed him, Mzungu. Sorry. Get over there and tighten those lug nuts. After Muhammad has tightened anything, nobody tightens it more. He tried. He came back and said, they're tight now. Sorry. Walked away. Muhammad apologized. I got in the vehicle, drove out into the street. They drove fine. But I wondered what kind of a mechanic turns my vehicle over to 15-year-old boys and doesn't keep his eyes on them. Later, I found out these boys didn't have money to go to high school. Parents didn't have money to send them to high school. So he took it upon himself to take these boys and train them as auto mechanics so that they could earn money, so they could eat, so they could sleep, so they could clothe themselves, and when they get married, have a family. And I thought, well, that's pretty impressive. And so we continued to build the church. We started with one big district for all of Uganda. But eventually we were able to divide it in half. One of our young men, Nathan Menya, had finished the course of study and was ordained, and he became district superintendent of one of the districts, and I continued as the district superintendent of the other district. And we continued to grow the church because the people there, like Kenya, also saw the importance of doing what they're supposed to do, tell people about Jesus. And we were growing the church and seeing men and women come to the Lord. We had young people coming to take the course of study to be ordained elder, or, as I always encourage, even laymen, if you're not called to be a minister, come and take the course anyway. Learn what the Bible has to say. Learn about how to study the Bible. Learn about how the church operates. And so we had 2 16-year-old boys one time come to our class. And as I was teaching, I thought, these boys are going to fail this course because they're not responding to my questions. I need to have answers from them. And then I realized that in the situation, the culture we have there, young boys are not to speak when the elders are present. So I went to the elders and I said, you need to talk with Moses and Job and tell them they're free to answer questions. And so they started answering questions, and today one of them serves as the district treasurer, one serves as the district secretary, and when they finish the course of study, I am sure one of them will be the district superintendent of our newest district in Uganda. But as we were growing the church, again, I started hearing something funny in our vehicle, so I drove into the garage. I found Muhammad. I started the car and said, listen to this, and he said, ooh, doesn't sound good. And I said, no, I didn't think so either. He says, leave it with me. I said, okay. He said, come back later. I said, when? He said, well, tomorrow afternoon. And I said, will my car be safe overnight? He says, yeah, no problem. Don't worry. I said, okay. And so I went home and I worked that day at home and I worked the next day. I came back in the afternoon. I walked in and says, what'd you find out? He says, well, Dan, you had a lot of things wrong. And he gave me a long list of a receipt with a total, and I paid him. I thanked him. I said, so everything's good now? He says, yep. So I got in. I started it up. I looked down at my gauges. You know, over here, I don't have to worry about looking at gauges on a car. It just is great to feel free to just drive. But over there, you watch your temperature gauge. You watch your charging gauge. You watch all the gauges. And I looked down and I said, did you have to take my car out for a test drive? He said, no. I said, well then, where's all my fuel? He said, what do you mean? I said, when I came in, it was full. Now, it's almost empty. Where's my fuel? He says, Dan, no one has touched your fuel. I said, Muhammad, I'm an Mzungu. And I took the book from my visor, and I showed him where I filled up last and how many kilometers I've traveled. He says, okay, pop the door to your gas cap. So I did. We went around. The gas cap was there. It takes a key to open the gas cap. It hadn't been jimmied. It was there. He says, see, no one has touched it. I said, Muhammad, I know what I know. He called his son Twaha to come, told him to go under the vehicle. He went under, and when he came out, he said, Dad, someone has opened the drain on the fuel tank. And I watched Muhammad's face just drop. He couldn't believe it. He turned to me and says, Dan, take your car up, fill it up with gas, with fuel, and bring it back. So I went up. It takes a while, but we got it done. We came back. I handed him the receipt. When he looked at the receipt, his face dropped even farther because I have double tanks on that van. And he looked at it, and then he reached into his pocket. And he pulled out Uganda shillings, and he began to pay me every shilling that I had just paid to put the fuel back in the vehicle. And I said, well, Muhammad, I appreciate this. You know, my grandpa, my dad, they taught me do the right thing no matter what the cost. Do the right thing. And you've done the right thing, and I thank you for that. And with that, I turned to leave, and he says, Dan, you can't go. I said, why not? He says, we haven't finished yet. I said, what do you mean? Is something different here in Uganda from Kenya side? He says, well, somebody saw a boy carrying jerry cans out of the garage this morning, and they saw where they went, so we sent somebody there while you were getting fuel. Found out that a man bought diesel fuel from the boy. Probably your diesel fuel, Dan. I said, okay. He says, I've called for him to come. In fact, here he comes now. And he walked up to us. We stood, and Muhammad said, did you take the Mzungu's fuel? Yeah. Okay, you have two options. One, we take you directly to the police, or two, we handle it here, your choice. He was a smart young man. He didn't want to go to the police. He said, let's handle it here. And so Muhammad called all the other mechanics to come. They made a big circle. They told the boy to lay down flat in the dirt. And they handed Muhammad a piece of rubber hose. And I wanted to leave. And he said I couldn't. Not until it was over. And he raised it up. He began to hit the legs of that boy. Over and over. And the boy started to squirm, trying to fend off the blows. Tears came, crying out. And he kept hitting the legs of that boy over and over until finally he said, enough. And he threw the hose down. He turned to me and said I could leave. I got in the vehicle and I left. And I said, I will never, ever go back into that garage again. That's not the right way to do things. That's not the way I would have done it. I'm never going back. And that's when God said, Dan, I want you to build a relationship with Muhammad. And I said, no way. Not me. Got the wrong guy. I know nothing about Islam. I know nothing about how to win a Muslim man to Christ. Wrong person, God. Find somebody else. And again, he said, Dan, I want you to build a relationship with Muhammad. And what do you say? I struggled until I realized I'm a missionary. I'm supposed to do these types of things. And, we are saved not to sit. We're saved to serve. And then I thought about the words from the book of Acts, chapter 20, where it says, Paul considered his life worth nothing if he did not share the good news of God's grace. So with a deep breath, I said, okay, God, if that's what you want me to do, I will do it. But I'm going to need more help from you than I've ever needed in my life, because I don't know where we're going to go with this. And so every time we leave home to come into town, I don't live in town. Pastor said, I'm from California. I don't know how you felt when you heard we were from California. I know what some people in this world think about people from California, but just relax. I'm not from Southern California. I'm not a beach bum, not a surfer. I'm not from Central California. I'm not a liberal. I'm not with San Francisco and that. I'm come from the northern part of California. I grew up on a dairy farm, so just relax. So I like to live out where I wake up with the cows and the chickens and the goats, and not with the horns and the people talking in front of my house. And so we'd come into town, we'd do our work, then I'd go down to the garage, and I'd try and build this relationship with Muhammad. I went in one day and he was leaning into an engine and I knew he was frustrated. It wasn't starting. I saw the boys around him. I came up behind him and leaned over his shoulder and said, I know what's wrong. I know what you need. He said, what? I said, a good mechanic. The boys laughed and I laughed, but Muhammad, he didn't laugh. We continued to build this relationship as we were building the church in Uganda. We were able to divide one of our districts in half again. We have now two Ugandans as district superintendents. We are growing the church. People are planting churches. We believe in reproduction. We want to see churches reproduce churches. We want people to reproduce themselves within the family of God. And it just kept growing and growing and growing. And as it was growing, we had a work and witness team come. And they came and helped us to build a church or two, and they'd go home, and we continued to reach out and try and build the church. And then I went back to the garage and tried to find Muhammad, and for the first time in all the time we'd been meeting, I always found him there. Today, he wasn't there. I said, where's Muhammad? They said, we don't know. Didn't come in this morning. I said, okay. So I came back a couple days later, still no Muhammad. He hadn't come in. Finally, the end of the week, he was there, and I went up. I said, where you been? Been on a holiday, taking vacation? Where you been? He said, no, I had a problem. I said, oh, what kind of problem? He said, well, I got in the vehicle, and I was driving out of town. I went around the curve, and as I did, two guys jumped down in the road. One was holding an AK-47 assault rifle, told me to stop. I stopped. Told me to get out of the vehicle. I got out of the vehicle. They walked up to me and stuck that gun right into my chest. He says, give me your watch. Give me your money. Give me your keys. Give me your telephone. And before they left me standing there alone without my vehicle, they ripped my chest open. And they opened the shirt and showed me this gouge that still looked infected to me. And I said, Muhammad, how did you feel with that gun stuck in your chest? He said, Dan, I thought I was going to die. I said, Muhammad, are you ready to die? He said, Dan, can anybody really be ready to die? I said, yes, if you know Jesus Christ as your Savior. And when he saw the direction I was going, he took a detour. He didn't want to talk about Christianity. Didn't want to talk about life after death. He didn't want to talk any about that. And so we talked about other things, and then I got in the car to go home, and as I went home, I had a little conversation with God, something like, God, you messed up. You missed it. He was ready. What happened? I'm doing all I can do. Why didn't you draw him in? No response. Teams kept coming to help us plant churches and build churches, and we had one that we were building down almost to the border of Rwanda. And we had already put the foundation in the slab. We put the walls up. We poured the ring beam around. And then the team comes and helps us build trusses, put them up, put the iron sheets on, and we complete the church. And so they came and we did that work. And then we went on safari. Safari is a Swahili word. It means to go on a trip. And so we go on a lot of safaris, but this time they wanted to go into the game park to see the animals that you've seen today. And so we went in and enjoyed our time seeing God's creation. And then we finished and we started driving home. And when you're driving home anywhere in Uganda, you keep your eyes fixed ahead, but you also watch the side roads because when you're driving, they can just swoop in on you without stopping. You watch your side mirrors because people come up behind you and tailgate you. So you have to be really careful as a driver. And we're just moving right along, heading for Jinja, when all of a sudden I look in my rearview mirror and I start praying, Lord, please don't let us break down here. This is not good. They won't enjoy it here in the van, and I won't enjoy it, and this won't be good. And he helped us to get home. You see, I was seeing black smoke pouring out of the tail of our vehicle. Everybody got out. They headed for water to drink, headed for showers, everywhere they wanted to go. I went to the telephone. I called up Muhammad, told him what I thought it was. He says, bring your vehicle down. I said, no, it's late. I can't do it tonight. And he says, okay, bring it first thing in the morning. I said, no, tomorrow's Sunday. I'm taking the people to church. He says, Dan, come really early. I said, what time? He said, 6. I said, 6? You don't keep time. You won't be there. He says, Dan, I'll be there. I said, okay. So I drove down and found him there. And I told him again what I thought it was. He walked to the back of the vehicle, put his fingers inside the exhaust pipe and says, yeah, you need an overhaul. Your oil's just pouring through the vehicle. I said, great. Now what am I going to do? He said, just leave it with me. I'll take care of it. I said, no, I'm taking the people to church this morning. He says, Dan, just leave it with me. I said, Muhammad, tomorrow I'm taking the people to the airport, to Entebbe Airport. Anybody heard of Entebbe? Raid on Entebbe? Remember a certain airliner that was hijacked with Israelis in it, and they went down to Entebbe and were held there until the special forces of Israel came and freed everybody but one lady and got them out of there? That was the airport I was to take these people to. He says, Dan, you won't get this vehicle to the airport. I said, Muhammad, I'm a good driver. I'll get it there. He says, no, you won't. I said, Muhammad, I'm a good driver. I'll get it. He says, I know you're a good driver. I said, how do you know? You've only ridden with me once, and that's when my wheels were going like this. He says, Dan, I heard you go to Kenya. I said, yes, I lived there for 10 years. I still have some work over there. He said, I heard once when you were coming back, your cable to your clutch broke. How did you get this vehicle back here? I said, well, I grew up on a dairy farm. And when my grandpa and my dad were away, I'd get the keys and I'd take the car out into the cow pastures and we'd do donuts and have fun and learn how to speed shift. I don't know if you all know about speed shifting. You have all automatics nowadays, but we used to shift without the clutch. And that's how I learned. He says, but how did you get it back into Kenya, or into Uganda? How did you get through the border? I said, oh, you get enough speed up, you kick it in neutral, you coast in, you park it, you go into immigration, you get your passport stamp, you go over to where you have to get papers for your vehicle stamp, you get the little pass that you have to go. There's a no man's land between Kenya and Uganda, and they lift the gate on one side, and you give the man the ticket, and you go through, and how did you get through? He says, well, I got my ticket, I went up to the policeman, I said, I need your help. He says, what do you need? I said, well, I need you to lift the gate before I start the car. He says, why? I said, because my car doesn't have a clutch and I'm driving it without it. He looked at me and says, do you realize I could write you a ticket right now for driving an unroadworthy vehicle on this road? I said, I know you could. I hope you won't. He said, go get in your car, and he lifted the gate, and I put it in first gear, and I turned the key, and it started, and I went under the gate through no man's land, coasted into the other side, got out, got my passport stamp, got the papers for the vehicle stamp, got the pass for the gate, took it to that man, he lifted the gate up, got in the car, shifted into to first, You see, I'm shifting with my left hand because we drive on the other side of the car on the other side of the road. And so I shifted it in the first gear. I turned the key. It started, got through the pass, headed out, shifted to second, third, fourth, fifth gear. And we're just cruising down the road towards Jinju when I came before a curve and a slow truck in front of me. And I knew I was in trouble, and I coasted off to the side and let it die. Waited a few minutes, put it in first, turned the key, got around that one 3 or 4 or 5 times. I had to do it, but that's how I got it back here to Jinju. He says, see, I told you, you're a mature driver. So what do you mean a mature driver? In America, they talk about certain people being mature drivers. He says, no, you're a good driver. I said, yeah, I can. And he says, but you won't get this vehicle down to Entebbe Airport. I said, what am I going to do? He says, you're not listening, Dan. Leave it with me. I'll take care of it. I said, okay. And so I left it with him. I arranged to borrow a vehicle for a few hours, and I took the people to church, and we had a good church service. We make it worthwhile coming to church. We stay for 3 or 4 hours. So when your pastor speaks more than 20 minutes, don't worry. Just be thankful you're not over in Africa. Anyway, we went to church. We came back, and I hoped to see the vehicle. It wasn't there. I waited through the afternoon, 4, 5, 6, 6:30, every night of the evening of the year. It's give or take 15 minutes, the sun sets. Give or take 15 minutes from 6:30. That ball of fire reaches the horizon, and when it goes, it's just 3 minutes. You can watch it just drop. We live right on the equator. And it dropped 7:30, 8:30, 9 o'clock is missionary midnight. We go to bed early, we get up early. And so I said, I'm going to bed, there's nothing I can do about it. So I went to bed somewhere around 1 o'clock in the morning, almost like you heard last night. I heard a horn honking, honking, honking. I got up, went out to see where in the world it was. It was at my gate. I went down, I opened the gate. Muhammad drove the vehicle in, got in, says, Dan, I'm sorry, I lost track of time. I said, I told you, you don't pay attention. He said, no, it wasn't that. You see, I was working on your vehicle in the back of the garage, and all the other mechanics were working on theirs, and when they left their vehicles sitting where they were, and I looked up, and I couldn't get your vehicle out. It was blocked in. So I got all my guys around every one of those vehicles. We started bouncing, until we bounced every one of them out of the way until I could drive your vehicle out, and here it is. I said, well, I'm impressed, but it's late. Let me get you back into town. He says, Dan, you need to go back to bed. You look tired. You go, I'll find my way. And he walked out the gate. Next morning, I got up early, walked out, see if the car started. It started. We loaded everything on top, got the people inside, drove down to Entebbe Airport, said goodbye to them. They were on their plane back to America. We headed back home, and as I'm driving, I have power. I have no black smoke. He had overhauled the engine in less than 18 hours. Try and do that here in America with all the things you have to do it with. Can't be done. Try and find a spare part, you don't know where it is in 18 hours. But he had done it for me, and there was power, and I was thankful. And we continued to grow the church, and so we then divided another district, and we have 4 districts now in Uganda. We have between 140 and 160 churches. I'm not sure exactly how many because they had a district assembly, and I haven't got the results in yet. But the church is continuing to grow. 3 of those 4 districts have Uganda district superintendents. The last one is being supervised by a Kenyan man that is over from the western part of Kenya, and he is overseeing that one. But it's just growing and growing and growing. And I'm thankful. I'm thankful for the Church of the Nazarene who believes in reaching to the whole world to make a difference in the lives of men and women. I got a call one day from Twaha, Muhammad's son. Dan, Dad's dying. I said, what do you mean Dad's dying? He says, the doctor says there's nothing more they can do. He's dying. I said, what's happened? He says he has diabetes. He has high blood pressure. There's nothing more they can do for him. I said, Twaha, just this week I was talking to a missionary friend of mine who's a physician's assistant, and she told me the best doctor for exactly what your dad has is Dr. Emmanuel down at the Rana Clinic. You bring your dad from home and you check him into Rana Clinic, ask for Dr. Emmanuel. He said he would do it. I couldn't go that day, but the next day I went down. I found out what room he was in. I walked down the corridor, walked into the room, and there he is sitting up in bed. He looked at me and says, Dan, you saved my life. I said, what do you mean? He says, Dan, I was dying. I was going to die. You saved my life. And I said, Muhammad, I can't save your life. Only God can save your life. And he cocked his head to the side and said, maybe. Let me think about it. I said, you do that. We talked a little bit more about what it meant to turn their life over to Christ, and I left, and I kept coming day after day. Each day he got stronger and stronger. Every day he didn't want to talk about Christ. He didn't want to talk about Christianity until he knew he was okay, He says, no more, Dan. And with that, I said goodbye to him at the hospital the last time before he was checked out. Got in the car, started driving home, had a second conversation with God, something like, God, that's strike two. You missed it again. What is going on? He should have been ready. Why aren't you drawing him near? Muhammad started coming to my house. He wanted his blood pressure checked. And so we had a blood pressure cuff. We started making a chart. His pressure started going down. He started eating less fried foods, less salt. He'd started exercising. He was doing well. And one day when he was over, I said, can you go a test drive with me? I'm hearing something in the back of my vehicle. He says, sure. So we got in the vehicle, started driving the road, and he laughed. Says, you don't know what that is, Dan? I said, no, never heard of it before in my life. He says, Dan, that's your rear wheel bearings. I said, well, no wonder I haven't heard anything about that. We have dirt roads, and the dirt gets into everything. And I said, now what am I going to do? He said, no problem. Let's go down to the garage. I said, Muhammad, we haven't had good luck down at your garage. Can we do it at my house? He said, sure. So we drove back to the house. We jacked the car up, put the jack stands underneath. We took off the tires. He asked for tools. He started making a lot of noise. You don't just run down to your Napa Auto Parts or your AutoZone and say, hey, I've got a 1987 Toyota Hiace van. I need wheel bearings. No. You take the part. You travel 50 miles down to the capital city of Kampala. You start going through these little holes in the wall, little shops, saying, do you have this? Do you have this? No, that's not it. Do you have this? Do you have? Until you find the right part. And if you can't find the right part, you get the one that's as close as possible and you try and make it work. He came back and he was proud. He held up the box. I recognized the colors. They were Toyota colors. He said, look at this, Dan. Genuine Toyota parts. Made in, look at this, Dan, Japan, not China. Look at that. And I was happy and he was happy. And he started working on the left side, packed it with grease, put it together, came to the right side, said, Dan, it's getting late. Can I come back tomorrow? I said, sure, no problem. He went home. Next day came, he didn't. Waited all day, kept looking down there at my car that was up on one side, and waited, no. Next day, no. Third day I called him, where are you? I'm up here in Igong, I'm not feeling well. I said, okay, no problem, when you're ready, it's not going anywhere. Finally he comes, he gets the right side put together, he takes it out for a test drive, says it's good now. I said, okay, thanks. And we went over to the corner of our compound where we have a faucet, we began washing our hands. I gave him one of my most prized possessions. A piece of lava soap. He started washing with that lava soap and said, man, this is great. This takes the grease right off. I said, yeah, it's great. He said, where'd you get it? I said, down at the store. He said, what store? I said, the one in Auburn, California, where I'm from. He just shook his head and laughed. He knew my humor. We got up. I knew we both had clean hands, but one of us didn't have a pure heart. And that's when Muhammad said, Dan, can I talk to you? I said, sure, anytime. You know that. Can we talk in the house? Sure, we've gone in many a time. When it's hot, we'll go in, and Melody once brought us nice, sweet iced tea and sat it before us, and he just looked at it, and she left and said, Dan, I can't drink this. I said, why not? He says, I don't take alcohol. I said, this isn't alcohol. This is just iced tea. It's not hot tea. It's iced tea. Try it. He drank it. He liked it. When Melody came back to take her glasses away, he said, would you write down the recipe so I can tell my wives how to make iced tea for me? So she wrote out the recipe for them. He is a polygamist. He had 3 wives and many children. Anyway, he says, can we go in and talk? I said, sure, anytime. Let's go. And so we head to the room, and he says, can John come to translate? I said, why? You speak English? I speak English. You speak Swahili? I speak Swahili. Y'all speak Swahili, don't you? If I tell you you speak Swahili, how many would believe? This is a church. There's supposed to be faith in this church. Where is the faith of your missionary? Okay, I'll prove it to you. Listen close. Tell me which animal in Swahili is called Simba? Lion, of course, because Simba means lion. Simple as that, huh? How do you say in English, you translate for me if you would, Hakuna Matata? No worries, or there is no problem. Rafiki means friend. Asante sana, squash banana. Why? Because we eat plantain bananas. They steam them, they mash them, and they set them before you on the banana leaf. And so you say, Asante sana, thank you very much for the squash banana. Just listen to the Lion King, pick out all the words that are not English, learn them, and you'll be okay in East Africa. No problem. Anyway, he wants to speak in his mother tongue. We have 52 different languages in Uganda alone. We speak a little English and a little Swahili. he wanted to speak his mother tongue, so I said, okay, John, come. And we sat down at the table, and the first words John translated for me were, I need Jesus. And I looked at Muhammad and I said, Muhammad, for 15 years, I've been telling you you need Jesus. He said, Dan, I need Jesus today. I said, it's very simple. All you need to do is pray. Tell God you're sorry for the things you've done. Ask Jesus to come live in your heart. Start reading the Bible. Do what the Bible says to do. He laughed at me. He says, Dan, I don't know how to pray. I said, it's simple, but I will pray a prayer. And if the words that I pray are the words that want to come from our heart, you repeat them. And so we bowed our heads and I prayed a simple sinner's prayer. When I finished, I said, amen. He said, amen. I looked up, big old tears coming down his cheeks. The second African man I've ever seen cry, because in the culture of East Africa, men do not cry. And I reached in the back of my Bible, and I took out a card like this one, a picture of Jesus knocking at the heart's door. And on the back, we have a stamp. It's a spiritual birth certificate. And I filled in the date, and I filled in his name, and I filled in my name. And I handed it across the table, and I reached across, took his hand, and I said, welcome to the family of God. And as I held his hand, I'm going, whoo, you're burning up. He says, yeah, I'm going to die. And I said, I know you are, and I am too, but neither of us are dying today. Let's go see Dr. Emma. So we drove into town. We went into Rana Clinic. A lot of people waiting to see Dr. Emmanuel. Every time the door opened, somebody came out. The next person got up and went in. Everybody stood up, moved over, sat down. Someone came out. Someone went in. We kept moving slowly. I knew it was going to be a while, so I went into the laboratory, asked for the technician to come out and draw blood from Muhammad's arm. He went in, and just before we went in, he brought us the results. We went in. The doctor asked, how you feeling, Muhammad? Not good. What's the symptoms? Well, I have a fever. I have a headache that just is different. I have aches in my joints. I'm not feeling well. I feel nauseous. Sounds like malaria. Let's get you tested. And I handed him the results. He looked at it and go, oh, malaria, plus. Huge amounts of malaria in his bloodstream. Wrote out a prescription, went into the pharmacy, got the medicine, gave him the first dose right there on the sidewalk. We went down to the garage. I found Twaha. I gave him the medicine, told him how he was supposed to give it to his dad. Take him home, make sure he drinks a lot of fluids, gets plenty of rest, and they went. Sometime later, we're walking down the street of Jinja, and who's coming toward us but Muhammad? He walks up to us and says, thank you so much. I said, no problem. You're feeling better? The malaria is gone? No, not about the malaria. Thank you for introducing me to Jesus Christ. And we talked, and he went, and I went. And Melody said, wow, he looks different. You see, what God does on the inside changes even the outside of a person. Months went by. He comes to me and says, Dan, I'm getting old. I said, don't say that. You're younger than I am, and I'm not getting old. He said, Dan, I'm getting old, and I can't be a mechanic anymore. I said, what? He says, I'll always be your mechanic. There's 3 people I'll be a mechanic for, and one of them is you. I said, I appreciate that. I said, what are you going to do to take care of your families? He said, I'm going to start a radio station. I said, a radio station? What do you know about a radio station? He said, not much, but the man up in the mountains, a friend of mine, he has a radio station. He's doing okay. I know I can do it, Dan, if you'll help me. I said, Muhammad, I grew up on a dairy farm. I used to work in banking. I'm a preacher. I'm a missionary now. I know nothing about radio. He said, no problem. I want you to be secretary treasurer of IFM radio in Iganga, Uganda. I said, Muhammad, I'm a missionary. I have a work permit that doesn't allow me to earn income. I can't do that. He thought for a minute and says, no problem, Dan. You do the work. I just won't pay you. It'll be okay. I said, well, I need to talk to a lawyer. So I went and talked to a lawyer. He said, as long as it doesn't pay you, you're fine. You can do it. I said, okay. So we started collecting things from around Uganda. We took rebar and welded it up into a stand and put an antenna up top. We wrote to London and got some parts sent in, and we opened up IFM radio, and it started to broadcast, and I gave him some hints on how to keep it going. And one day he came to me and says, Dan, I think the Church of the Nazarene should be on the radio. I said, Muhammad, I told you to go to the bankers, to go to the big businesses, try and get them to advertise for money on your radio station. The church doesn't have money for radio. I'm sorry. He says, no, for free. I said, for free? He says, yeah, free. I said, bure? He says, bure. I said, let me talk with Reverend Menya. And so I talked with him. He says, yeah, we can send Rebecca and David. Every Tuesday they go up and are on the radio from 10 until midday. And it was going good. I heard good reports. Even though the language I didn't understand, everybody that understood it told me it was a good radio broadcast. Until one day he comes to me and says, Dan, we got a problem. I said, what's that? He says, about the radio. I said, well, you're the general manager. You handle problems. I only handle taking accounts and sending letters out for you on the email. He says, no, it's about the Nazarene hours on the radio. I said, what? Everybody says it's good. He says, read these letters. And I began to read the letters, one after the other after the other. And I said, they're all saying the same thing. Is this everything? He says, yeah. He says, what are we going to do? I said, that's simple. They're all complaining that the Nazarene hour isn't long enough. You need to give us an extra hour for free. He says, for free? I said, yeah, Bure. He says, Dan. I said, Muhammad. He says, I can do this. So from 10 until 1, we are now on the radio every Tuesday. And that's a great time because all over Africa at 1 o'clock, the governments ask the radio stations and televisions to put out their broadcast. And so you have to read what the government wants the people to know. And everybody wants to listen. They turn their radios on, their televisions on early, so they hear what's going to start at 1 o'clock. If you're working in the president's cabinet, you want to be hearing because instead of going to lunch, you may have to go back and clear your office out because you've been out. You've been kicked out of the office. And so people are listening. By turning in early, they're hearing the end of the Nazarene hours. And people are starting to listen, and now we're getting calls. People are starting to call in the first radio call-in program that they'd ever had up in that area because they wanted to know more about Jesus and how to become a Christian. You see, that is a densely populated Muslim area, and it's Muslims who are calling in anonymously, asking about the different things about the Bible and what it means and what it says. And so they come now to the door of the radio station at 1 when David and Rebecca come out, and they say, would you pray for my child? They're sick. Pray for my wedding, my marriage. It's not good. Pray for our school fees. We don't have them to send our kids. And so they're praying. And Rebecca comes to me one day and says, Dan, can we start a Bible study up here? I said, sure, no problem. That'd be great. And so she started with ladies and then finally children and ladies and then men and ladies. And it started to grow. And she says, Dan, we need a church. I said, we don't have any land. I'm sorry. Months later, Muhammad comes, Dan, we need a church up in Iganga. I said, we don't have any land, Muhammad. Have you been talking to Rebecca? No. I said, why do you think we need a church? He says, I want my children to know Jesus like I know Jesus. I said, well, we don't have land. She says, let me work on it. One day when I'm super busy trying to get statistics sent into the district and into our field offices, I get a call, Muhammad, Dan, would you come up? I need you here. I said, tomorrow. I can come tomorrow, not today. He says, Dan, I need you today. There's a person who wants to sell a piece of land. So I go up. He takes me out. Huge piece of land. I'm going, it's a waste of my time. We can't afford it. It's too big. He says, let me talk with her. Talked to her, found out she wanted to move down to the capital city of Kampala, and she's selling for the land cheap. And I said, is this for the whole land? He says, yeah. I said, we can afford that. And so we bought the land. Immediately after buying the land, he comes to me saying, Dan, when can we start building the church? I said, oh, Muhammad, you're so pushy here. What's the deal? He said, we need this church. I said, well, we need to meet the health requirements first. That means making sure that there's proper sewage taken care of. And that means they're digging 30 feet down by hand into the ground. And because it's a church, it has to be a 4-holer. And so we dug a nice rectangle. We started going down, 30 feet down. The most beautiful toilets you've ever seen dug. They were straight. They had square corners. My house in Jinja doesn't have square corners. And the slope is not even level. And so we pour the slab and we make the holes. We even put footprints so you knew exactly where to stand when you went in to do what you needed to do. Beautiful. We put walls up. We put an iron sheet. It was a VIP toilet. Ventilated, improved, pit latrine. We had a 4-inch pipe coming out of the ground and up through the ceiling, and we put a screen on it because flies fly up towards the light, but they never fly away from it, and they die, and the smell goes. People from all over the area started coming just to look at the Church of the Nazarene's toilets. Try that for an evangelistic tour. People started coming. Muhammad says, when can we start building the church? So we came up with a design of making a long building that we would divide one day with walls for Sunday school classes, but we won't put them in yet. We'll have the church. And today in Iganga, Uganda, we have a Church of the Nazarene. Why? Because someone wanted to be a friend. Because one day God brought this man to his knees. One day he wants his family to know Jesus. Rebecca wants people to know Jesus, so she's holding Bible study. And it's just growing and growing and growing. Thank you, Church of the Nazarene. Thank you for sending missionaries to over 162 different world areas around this world. Thank you for sending Melody and I back in 1986 to Kenya and then on to Uganda. Thank you for praying. Thank you for giving. I understand your church is right up there. You always pay more than the 5.5% that every local church of the Nazarene around the world is supposed to do, whether it's in Peru or Brazil or England or Germany or even in Iraq. Did you know we have a church in Baghdad? First Church of the Nazarene. Because we believe in making Christ-like disciples in the nations. But my friends, don't forget you're part of this world. You were responsible for this area. You have relatives and friends and co-workers and schoolmates who don't know Jesus. You were responsible for them. We are not saved to sit. We're saved to serve. And growing up on a dairy farm, I know this to be true. You may not because you live, well, I saw the farm, so you're not in the city so much. But I know this to be true. Shepherds do not give birth to sheep. Did you know that? Sheep give birth to sheep. And speaking Southern, y'all are the sheep. You're supposed to be reproducing yourself. The shepherd feeds. The shepherd leads. The shepherd corrects. But you all are the ones who are supposed to reproduce yourself in the people you know. Whether it's the person you buy your milk and bread from at the grocery store that you say hi and bye to without even looking at a name tag. One day, when you make it to heaven, I hope you are called by your name. Names are important in Africa. I was just talking with Pastor about someone from Kenya. I said, oh, tell me their name, because I know where they live because of their name. Names are important. Use people's names. And they will look at you and go, wow. And each time you see them, use their name. Until one day, hopefully not 15 years, but one day they will say, why are you so joyful? Why are you seeming to be happy? And you'll have a chance to introduce them to the best friend that they'll ever need. Our responsibility as a church is to make Christ-like disciples in the nations. May God bless you as you trust God to do what He has asked you to do about going into all the world and making disciples. God bless you.